So now we're going to go into talking about what are the common misconceptions demonstrated to the Muslim population regarding the Shia Muslims. So Faizan and I will talk about the things we've heard and things we've heard growing up, and then we would like you guys to talk about like questions that you've asked, like, oh, do you guys actually do this, or like certain misconceptions that you guys had to deal with, or certain misconceptions that you've seen on social media regarding Shia Muslims. So yeah, Faizan, do you want to go first?
Sure. I can start with a story, which I was telling
Okay.
Yasmin about earlier. When I was in middle school, I was, huge into sports, and I went to an Islamic school. And so we always used to have this like annual like Islamic school like soccer tournament, basketball tournament, whatever. And it was always hosted at this school that was predominantly Shia, and it was a beautiful school. They had their own cafeteria, their gyms were huge, like it was amazing. I didn't know that because I was an innocent, like 12-year-old kid, just, going to have fun, playing basketball, whatever. And then they had this really beautiful musalla area, which was massive. It was bigger than what we had in our school. We paid in a gym for the fact. But it was amazing. But then I can't recall the details of why it was that we didn't pray with them. I was telling Yasmin it was either because we were just late for the Jama'ah and like it was like we had to pray by ourselves, or it was from us some other reason, which I honestly don't recall. But I do remember one thing very glaringly, and I remember the people who used to come to that masjid on a regular, which was the Shia people. They used to have this little, I don't know what the name is called, but it's like that little circular like rock type thing.
Oh,
Right? I'm sorry, I don't know what it's called. My
Yeah,
bad.
turba.
yeah.
Yes.
Turba. And so they used to put that on in the sujood where they do sujood, and they used to put that there. And someone just told me, oh, like that's how they pray, and they're just different. But what was kind of shocking to me was that I was in an Islamic school, and no one actually told me why they were praying differently or educated me on the fact that they were different and these are the theological differences. I was simply told, they're different, and that's the end of it. And so the misconception I always had growing up was like, oh, they pray differently, they're just kind of weird. And that's obviously not correct because I was just uninformed and uneducated. But that's the thing that would kept perpetuating in my mind simply because I was never around too many Shia people, and that was what it was. So my misconception was always like, they pray different, leave them alone, it is what it is.
Wow. Yeah, no, for me, growing up, like my mom never taught me like what was Sunni and what was Shia. She never said you're this, you're that. She always brought me up to tell me that, hey, we're Muslim, we do this, we do this, we do this. And I grew up with family friends who were Shia, but like I never looked at them different or anything like that. They prayed differently, but I'm like now that I think about it, I'm like Sunnis pray differently too. So like it didn't really occur to me or didn't really matter to me. And then but as soon as I got into high school, that's when people were like, oh, you shouldn't be this person's friend. And I'm like, why? Because they'll be like, because they're Shia. And then I'm like, what's Shia? Like, I don't know what that is, right? And then like they kept saying that. So then I went and I asked my mom, like, Mama, what is Shia? And then my mom was like, oh, it's just a different type of just a different type of Muslim. They just do things differently, but we're all Muslim, and you do not say Shia. And like she just ended the conversation. She's like, you don't say that, you just say Muslim. And I was like, okay. And then a few years later, a conversation came up again, and they were like, oh yeah, I hate Shias. And then I'll be like, why? And they're like, oh, because they pray to a rock and that's haram. And I was like, huh? Like that doesn't make sense to me. So then I go to my mom and my brother and I'm like, so and so said this, and they said that they're not Muslim because they pray to a rock. And my brother brings out the hadith and he's like, no, the reason why they do that is because there's a hadith where it was like that you need to pray on top of like something pure, natural, that's soil, right? And that's why they do it. And then I'm like, oh, okay. Like then why are they being weird? And then he's like, just ignore them. They're dumb. And I'm like, okay. But like now that I think back at it, I wish I went back and I had the opportunity to educate them and be like, no, that's not the case, right? But then now that I think about it too, I'm like, maybe are too ignorant to even listen to what I have to say, you know? But yeah, how about you guys? What experiences have you guys had?
All right, you want to take this?
You want to go first?
Oh, you can go first. I'll go after you. It's fine.
You can go first.
Okay, sure. So I mean, I didn't really have that many encounters in Canada specifically, just because okay, I've only been here for 3 years now, and I don't really know that many practicing Muslims. I mean, most of the problems that I've heard is mostly from okay people who either come from a religious family or who are actually like devoted Muslims, Shia or Sunni themselves, which I haven't found that many people over here. Most of the problems that I had was in the last place that I used to live, which was UAE, and oh man, like it was really bad because it's a predominantly Sunni country, and all the school curriculums are based on Sunni teachings, so nothing about Shias has to come in. I mean, most of my problem, a lot of problems that I used to have was, especially in IE class. I was talking to Maria about this. So in IE class, the teacher just okay, he's talking about, for example, he's talking about evolution. That's one of the things he was talking about. And it's like, oh, we didn't come from animals, blah blah blah. Like this didn't happen. And okay, I turned back to my Iranian friends who I know are Shias, and I explained to them because I know okay they don't know about religion that much. They come from their families are not so religious, so I try to explain to them. And then the teacher calls me. I was like, "What are you saying to them?" And I explained to him. And he's like, "Oh no, that's wrong." And then he starts to pick a fight with me. I was like, "Okay, what's wrong with you?" I was like, "Okay, go to the principal's office." This happened on so many occasions, and I remember like one of the biggest ones was about I think it was about Muta, and it got so big. He sent me to the principal's office, and I was about to get expelled. I'm just like, okay, why can't you just like sit down and let me explain it to them? Why do you have to be that much against it? Like, what's wrong with you?
Damn.
And another one was also the praying to the rock, and the Yasmin mentioned. It wasn't necessarily a rock because in like the Shia religion, the Shia sect, we are okay with people having shrines for their as their graves, right? But Sunnis they believe that okay, if you have shrines, they're going to pray to the shrine, not to God anymore, right? And they're like, okay, having shrines is not allowed. But I was explaining that to him, and then there was another problem. It's just it was a mess. Like UAE was a mess.
You know, I grew up in UAE as well. I was there for like 8, 9 years, and
Mm.
I never even like to your point. I never even heard the term Shia until that like school like story that I was talking about. And you're right, like it's really just thrown under the rug, and no one knows about it, or people just like don't want to talk about it.
Mhm.
So, for me, honestly, I like since coming to Canada, I wasn't really part of a Muslim community until coming to London, where like at Western, like I started joining the MSA, and before that, I wasn't really involved in any. Like, I mean, other than back home, but here, I wasn't involved in any, and like before that, I didn't even know there was Shias and Sunnis. Same with Yasmin, like my parents just never taught me like, oh, like we're different or they're different or whatever. It's just I just practice Islam like how I thought was like you're supposed to practice Islam. So like the differences weren't like didn't really mean anything to me. And when I started like when I understood that there's different sects and stuff, again the differences didn't matter to me just because I was like, okay, it's not that big of a deal. I think I wouldn't say I've faced like discrimination directly, like Ali, but like I've seen a lot of things on social media that's definitely impacted me. And actually, my sister who goes, I know like they had issues in like their prayer rooms about like of people like throwing out the turbas and just like throwing them out and not letting them pray with it. I know like a similar incident has happened at Western before, but I wasn't aware of it until after I joined the MSA. So personally, I haven't really experienced like really serious discrimination, but I have seen it happen. So
I have a question for you guys. I know you guys obviously can't speak on behalf of the entire like Shia community. But I'm just curious because I noticed that two of the contrasting themes here, not contrasting, but two of the things here are, one is being accepted as just a Muslim, right? No, you're not being recognized as like a particular divide. And the other one is discrimination based on theological differences. So I'm curious with both of you, if there were an ideal world, which one would you prefer? Would you prefer to be recognized as a Shia but not be discriminated against and not be acted towards differently?